Hey, Crossroads, we love you guys. We miss you dearly. And until we are able to gather again together corporately, we are excited to walk through the Bible with you. And for this first week, we will be walking through the book of Philippians. So, Philippians, if we had to pick one key theme, one key word, it would be rejoice. That Paul says no matter what our circumstance looks like, no matter what our world does, where it's broken and plagued by sin, we can rejoice because of Jesus. So, as Paul writes this letter, it's probably toward the end of his house arrest in AD 61, about a year after he wrote Ephesians and Colossians. Now, Paul was first introduced to Philippi when he was passing through preaching the gospel. In Acts chapter 16, you can read this story. They're in prison because they're preaching in a Roman colony about King Jesus, and they don't like that because they only believe in King Caesar, and they throw him in prison, and Paul and Silas rejoice. They choose to rejoice, and they're singing songs. And all of a sudden, this crazy thing happens where there's an earthquake and the jail's falling apart, and it looks like the prisoners could have run away, and the jailer is about to kill himself, but stop. Paul and Silas say, "We're still here. Do you know Jesus?" And they preach the gospel. And in this incredible story, the jailer and his family come to know Jesus. And there's this church that is founded in the town of Philippi that we read about here in the book of Philippians. So Paul writes this letter to the Philippians to really just thank them for their financial help, that they understood that being the church is not just about meeting, but is about being the church. And they're meeting Paul's financial needs, and they're encouraging him. And in the beginning of his letter to the Philippians, he's just saying, thank you. Thank you so much for everything that you've done for me. Thank you so much for the means you've given me. And he encourages them to say, hey, even if I don't live, I'm going to rejoice because I know that knowing Jesus and being with Jesus is better. And past that, he says it's better than any little rivalry that we could have. He addresses a rivalry between people named Yodia and Syntyche, that he says these little quarrels that we have are not even worth comparing to the incredible gift that we have in the gospel. So don't get caught up on these little things. Focus on Jesus. And a large portion of this book is devoted to him refuting the teaching of the Judaizers, people that were saying you need Jesus plus this, which is legalism. You need Jesus plus the law, Jesus plus your good works, which is just not true. But then he goes all the way to the other side of the spectrum of people that were preaching this thing that I'm not going to try and pronounce, and saying, well, hey, it actually doesn't matter what you do. You can do whatever the heck you want, and you're saved, and it's fine. But as you look at Romans 5, Paul would obviously disagree with that. And the main thing you need to get there is that we do not do good things because we want to become saved, but rather because we are saved, we so act, not as a means of attaining salvation, but because we don't desire to do anything else except show honor to the God that has saved us. And you'll see a couple of key themes throughout Philippians that we can take joy, like we've said before, that we can rejoice in the fact that not that our situation is good, but the being a Christian is not blindly shoving down our problems and acting like everything's okay, but it's admitting that this world is broken and we need a Savior, and that Savior is Jesus, that it is Christ, that because of his death, because of his humiliation, because of what he suffered on the cross, and the fact that he didn't stay there, that he was exalted above every single name, and that he defeated death. And when Jesus died on the cross, death died that day, that the ability of death to hold us and to have the final say was nullified. And that because Jesus died on the cross, it's almost as if we died with him. If we have a relationship with Jesus and we put our faith in him, we have union with Christ, that when God looks at us, does not see our sin and our brokenness and our shame, but he sees Jesus. That we don't have to wonder if we are good with God. And as we look forward to the return of the Lord, it's not nervously, it's not anxiously, but it's expectantly, knowing that when God returns, we're identified with Christ. We're not identified by our sin anymore. And that is an incredible thing to hold on to. And I would just encourage you guys, as we sit in a time of our world that is broken and plagued by sin, and it's very obvious in a time where our world is freaking out, that we have the opportunity to rejoice and know that Jesus is better.